that great introduction, Adrian. Hello, everybody, and it's a pleasure to be here. Just to kind of add a couple of things to what Adrian said, although I'm the Director of Business Development for HR Prime, I still manage a small group of clients that I still consult with. And I'm still open to consulting, but business development is my primary role there right now. I'm also a minority owner in HR Primed, and I'll talk about HR Primed at the end very briefly, because the topic of today is how does your business look in these COVID times? And I did want to start before we get to the slides, just to let you know that as you're all aware, this is an ever-changing situation. It's ever-evolving. Sometimes it's hour by hour. Certainly at the beginning of all this 3 months ago, and yes, it's been 3 months since we went into lockdown, the changes were faster and more furious, slowed down a little bit, but they're still there. We don't know what's going to be happening in the future. It all depends on, crushing the curve and things of that nature. So what I tell you today may not be in effect tomorrow. And certainly there's a few things we'll talk about with why that's happening. So just keep that in mind. We're always forever on top of the changes and letting people know as quickly as possible, either directly or through our social media presence. And I think it's important that the folks on this call make sure that they are aware as well. And, you don't get a lot of notice when, the individual that has the childcare center, well, you can open on Friday and, but a lot goes into that opening, right? So, but we'll talk about that. So I'm going to share my screen. Get the slides up, and I will apologize in advance. I'm not a big fan of slideshows, so I may jump ahead a little bit and then have to go back, but Adrian told me I have to do it this way, so. So easing back from COVID-19, and you've heard these cliches before: the new normal, unprecedented times, excuse me, uncertainty. I'm going to try to minimize those cliches, definitely, but it does relate to a situation that is we have never encountered before. And I think a lot of this is we are learning as we go, and trying to do the best we can with the information available. A lot of what I'm referring to in HR is coming from public health. Excuse me, I should have drank some water before this. Coming from public health directives, as well as temporary changes to the various legislation acts like the Employment Services Act. Also, just before we get going, I know that as people populate questions, Adrian will wait for when I pause. And if I don't pause, Adrian, because I can go on and on and on, just unmute yourself and say, Neil, we need to answer you a question. I'm completely okay.
I can do that.
Okay.
Thank you, Neil.
Great. So on that note, your hosts and my business partner said I had to do one thing, and that was to highlight that this Tar Heel is our mascot. He is a certified human resources dog, and he is also knowledgeable about all things HR. So he gets top billing. This is me. As Adrian said, we've known each other for 3 years. Can't believe it's been that long. If you guys know Rob, I've known him even longer, back before when he could get a haircut. So again, I have a very deep background in HR, generalist at heart, but my prime passion is the legislative, compliance, and mandatory training pieces, as well as health and safety, which I focus in on. And also just a disclaimer that the information I talk in here does not constitute legal advice. And if you did need that type of extra service, There's lawyers, and also if, you know, anybody who engages with us, we go that extra mile to guarantee that it holds up legally. But just for the sakes of this webinar, it is for information purposes only. So, what are we talking about here? The new normal, what does that mean? Well, we have legislative considerations. The Employment Standards Act has been amended to meet the current situation. They are temporary in nature. We have different types of workplace arrangements now. Some people are still working remotely. There is a thought that perhaps some employers will stay working remotely even post-COVID. That's certainly something I've heard, and I think that's something some organizations have already decided on. But it's important to note that even when working remotely, and that it means working in your own home, there are still legislative considerations for the organization as well as the person working from home. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about working remotely. And of course, as we are slowly reopening the economy bit by bit, there are new considerations that are being added. They could be temporary or they could be permanent. I'm of the opinion that a lot of what is going on now will remain a permanent fixture, especially with respect to health and safety. So plexiglass at banks and grocery stores, and maybe in some of your workplaces, that's not going away. That's going to be there forever. Acclimating your employees to new HR and HS health and safety realities. We're going to talk a lot about the fear that some people have. And of course, we know that some people don't respond well to change. So how do we get employees to understand that we're doing this for your safety, so that you can remain healthy, as well as to keep other employees safe and healthy as well. And again, the huge uncertainty is certainly taken a toll, not just on employees, but I think on managers and owners as well. Employees are coming to them for answers, and they only know what they know, either by talking to folks like me, lawyers, or paying attention to what's going on in the media. And they don't have a crystal ball either. So how do you manage and navigate your employees while still getting them to be productive as well? Health and safety and HR steps that need to be implemented and enforced by employers. So this means looking at your policies and amending them. Again, they may be temporary, they may be something that is permanent in nature. A couple of terms I've been using with clients is, during all of this, you must remain agile, resilient, and malleable. So you've got to be prepared to switch gears on a dime. We're slowly reopening the economy. If the cases shoot up, Doug Ford, Justin Trudeau may decide, nope, we're back in lockdown the next day. So you have to do that planning so that, again, you can switch gears on a dime, okay? A question I keep getting asked is, how long will this be with us? Some of the predictions, and this is what I'm telling current clients or advising in webinars like this, plan for up to 2 years. In some way, shape, or form, we are going to be impacted by this for up to 2 years. So I think you need to develop a short-term plan, a medium-term plan, and then the longer-term plan, all keeping in mind that you need to be able to jump from situation to situation, okay? And I've kind of alluded to this, employee fear and mental health. And we are starting to see that some employees' mental health is starting to deteriorate, or it's of concern. particularly with those employees that are working remotely. And that's not to discount the ones that are returning home. You know, I have two teenage kids. They're pretty independent. And even though I'm a self-employed consultant, prior to this, I was out of the house every day of the week, even if it was just for a couple of hours. So being home again on a pretty much well, I've slowly started going out to client sites, but it's only like once a week maybe. So as much as I loved my kids when they were little, I can't imagine what it would be like with younger children trying to get work done. And I know for some of my clients' employees, that's been a huge challenge, and they're getting impacted by that. So, and again, just the overall fear of what happens if I get sick, as well as maybe they're worried about other people in their lives as well. So we'll expand on that a little bit as well. So, legal considerations. We are in a state of emergency, and right now that is expected to end on June the 19th. I'm not sure, and again, I got mixed messages from the province on this, because originally I was sure that they said June 30th, and then it flipped to June 19th. As you know, most of the province is in a second stage reopening as of 12:01 Friday. The places that can't open include Niagara region, Windsor, Essex, Sarnia-Lambton, Cornwall, Stormont, as well as the GTA and Toronto proper. So Durham County, Halton, to the north, York, they're not allowed to open. And of course, that's because 70% of cases, of COVID cases, are centralized in that area. And if you'll notice, the common thread between all the other areas, Niagara, Windsor, Essex, Sarnia-Lambton, were all border cities. So that came under a consideration as well. Now, what they have said is that if the state of emergency is lifted a week from Friday, that means we're now in stage 2 reopening. Do I know what's going to happen, and if that is going to happen? I don't. But with the state of emergency, that gives the government some extraordinary powers to change things like the Employment Standards Act, to close and open businesses, places of worship, and other places where people may gather to protect the greater public health. So the reopening the economy, again, I believe it's a 5-stage process, and it's all based on the numbers. And today's numbers were at 236, so that's the second day in a row where they've been low 200s. A good sign, as long as the numbers are accurate that they're reporting. They have talked about that it's inevitable we will have a second wave and maybe other waves after, but nobody knows when that is. I think it's also good to highlight here that even in the reopening, as many of you are aware, this isn't an en masse opening. Restaurants aren't going to be able to have, if they're licensed for 100 people, they're not going to be able to have 100 people. They're going to be operating at 30, 40, 50% capacity, which in some cases may be, depending on your business, you may not be operating at your full capacity. I have a spa client up in York, and they reopened, and they're only operating at 30% capacity. The size of their physical location, when they did all the, when they were instituting all the new protocols, that's all they can manage right now, is having 30% of people in there. So we are largely guided by this state of emergency and what the government is able to order us to do as a result of that. Health and safety. I mean, this is one of the most paramount issues, right? So on top of the regular occupational health and safety that is there, we also have these expanded requirements. And this also applies, and I'll talk to this a little bit more, to the remote workplace as well, okay? There are still some health and safety considerations. Basically, and I'm jumping the gun a little bit before we get to remote workers, the relevant employment legislation is still applicable to remote work sites, so your house, with a couple of exceptions, which I'll get into when we talk a little bit more about health and safety. But it is critical that your employees understand this. One of the key things in all of this has been communications by employers to their employees. And as soon as you know anything, as soon as you have answers, it is important that you get it out in some fashion, whether it be email, text, and you need to ensure that everybody reads it so that they're aware as well, okay? And again, just to also reinforce this, yeah, we've got some parameters legally that we can use so that we can enforce things. But again, I go back to, this is a situation nobody has ever encountered before. It's time to be a little bit reasonable. And again, jumping the gun a little bit more, in terms of getting into some things, and this may come up as a question, but I'll use it as an example. Childcare for some, for some places is reopening. Now, if you read through what that means for childcare centers, yes, there's going to be strict guidelines in terms of health and safety, cleanliness, physical distancing. There's also something in there that, so not everybody is going to get their childcare spot. And I don't know how childcare centers are going to sort that out. But some parents may get told, I'm sorry, we can't have your child here because we can only fill it to 30 or 40% capacity. So post-COVID, when, childcare centers are allowed to have their full capacity of children, they have to hold on to that. To those that they are saying, we can't give you a spot right now, they still are entitled to hold on to that spot for them for when they can have them back. So what does that mean? That means that we're still going to have parents who have taken leaves from work because they had childcare issues. The other piece to also note, which I caught in the release from this, is that if a parent does not feel comfortable or has a fear of sending their child to a childcare place, they can say, I don't want to send them back. And again, the childcare center is obligated to hang on to their spot. And again, I've had this question quite a number of times about childcare and employees that are working remotely. What can we expect, or what can we say we expect in terms of productivity? And it's a tough question to answer. But basically, yes, you've got some things that you can fall back on in terms of expectations, but let's be reasonable, right? It's a new situation for everybody. If your employee is the prime caregiver, that's going to impact. So try as much as possible to work with your employees so that you can get the best out of them, okay? And I will talk about some human rights considerations later on when we get to that. But that also falls underneath this as well. Again, what is reasonable? Sorry, I'm just gonna move my, so the health and safety under health and safety legislation, you have a due diligence to do everything within your power to keep your employees safe. That hasn't changed with this. But you do need to ensure that you are aware of what as I've said, what public health is saying, what the experts in health and safety are saying, and what human resources are saying. I am of the opinion, and I was having this debate with a client yesterday, I think we go above and beyond. And what I mean by that, and again, this particular client is a healthcare center, so they're seeing sick people. Um, you know, according to the guidelines coming from the healthcare ministry, you know, people don't need to wear masks if they're not directly serving. So doctors and nurses, that's a given. They have to. And in this particular health center, they're donning full personal protective equipment. It's almost like the hazmat suits. But for in this particular health center, they also do counseling. So as long as they maintain 6 feet social distance between them and their client, that's okay under public health guidelines. For me, I'm advocating that masks be worn. I just think there's a lot of changing, and again, this isn't fear mongering, but as I look at the information that's out there, there has been a lot of change in terms of what is considered safe and what isn't. A lot of backtracking, a lot of misinformation. So when I'm speaking to clients and I say, this is what public health is telling you, these are your minimum requirements. But if you really truly want to protect your employees, maybe you go a little bit above and beyond, but that's a personal choice, okay? Again, there are some laws that remain. They haven't changed. Requirements on employees to be at work are still there. And I know there's been, you know, especially with remote workers and even people returning to work, I think employers are showing a tremendous amount of flexibility, of leniency, because they're still learning all this as well. And they are mindful that they want to treat their employees fairly and reasonably. And because also, let's be honest here, how employers treat their employees during this, they will remember when all this is over. And when the economy gets better, if they don't feel they've been treated reasonably, they may choose to go somewhere else. So I think it's a bit of a case of strong communication, outline expectations, but a little bit of flexibility. But again, at the end of the day, you are a business, you have things that need to be done. And if you don't get them done, there may not be a job for anybody at the end of the day. So you are well within your rights to do such things as, if they aren't even meeting the new requirements, which may be a little bit less, that's a performance issue. So you're well within your rights to address that and take that on, and any action as necessary. Okay. So let's talk about working remotely considerations. And Adrian, do we have any questions, or am I good?
So far we're good, and we're just almost at 1:30.
Oh, wow. Crap.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry.
I know the time goes by really quick. It's such valuable information so far, but if anyone does have questions, please bring them in. I'll make sure Neil gets them. Okay. But we're good so far.
Yeah. So I sort of alluded to this in terms of managing the performance of your employees. Again, when you're working remotely, if the employee does not have access to everything they would normally have at an office, you may have to make some allowances for that. Okay. In terms of productivity, I think you want to establish those guidelines early on and let them know this is what it is. Some companies, some organizations are choosing to have employees do, you know, track their time on an Excel spreadsheet. There is tracking technology out there for people that are working remotely, things of that nature. And certainly employers are very much have the right to do that. But again, I think everything needs to be reasonable. So, and again, if you're, I know a lot of employers have made accommodations for people with small children. So they get a schedule from them at the beginning of the week. Okay, I can work online in the morning. I need from 1 to 3 to be offline, but I can get back on from 3 to 5 and again from 7 to 9. If that's meeting your business needs, there's no harm in in doing that. All of the early research on this, and it is very early, but all of the early research indicates that employers are getting a hell of a lot more out of employees that are working remotely right now. And again, for those companies that were kind of leery on letting employees work remotely and perhaps didn't allow it, I think a large chunk of them have changed their minds on that because of this productivity this productivity piece, but also they see the savings of having somebody work remotely. I mean, I have to be very honest here with you. There is a savings to having people work remotely. And I know some of my employers have said, you know, our working hours are 9 to 5. I know that employee is not on there from 9 to 5, but they're getting their work done. And that, at the end of the day, is what matters to me. If they choose to do it at 2 a.m. in the morning, because that's the only time they can get it done, I'm good with that. I by no means am saying to all of you that that's what you need to do, because that may not work for you, but it's certainly something an option that's available. Very quickly, health and safety considerations. Occupational health and safety still applies to anybody working in their home. So what some clients have been doing is they have their employees with their cameras on their phone, or cameras on their laptops, and they just have them show their workspace so that they can make recommendations if they see anything that's a glaring health and safety consideration. The only difference with health and safety in your home as opposed to an actual physical work site that's owned by the company is that Ministry of Labor health and safety inspectors cannot come into private residences. So that may become a bit of an issue if an employee working at home is claiming an injury during work time, and depending on the severity of it, how do you prove that? So sometimes it's a bit of an honor system right now, but at the moment, those are some of the things that we're working under. Did I see some questions popping up?
Yes, there was one question from Tony.
Yeah.
So their client operates a pharmacy. The manager has young children and has been off the entire time. They now need this person to come back to work. Is there anything that they can do to get her back to work within law, of course?
Well, and if this is a Niagara, I assume everybody's Niagara based here. Under the state of emergency, it is very clear that if you need to take time off for childcare, the employer must accommodate that. Otherwise, it then becomes a human rights issue. Say all things being equal, June 19th, they declare that Niagara can go to stage 2 opening and there's childcare available. That answer may change based on, I don't know the age of these children, or if there's a secondary caregiver in the home. But basically, the best advice that I can give that person right now is you've got to allow the person to have that time off if they don't have any reasonable means of providing care to their children. Okay. And again, I don't know if something keeps cropping down that says 7, so I assume that's either people joining or questions.
Oh, no, Tony just said that she understands, and thank you.
Okay, no problem. Sustaining employee engagement. I also have to add here, folks, that not everybody is thrilled to be working at home. And that includes some surprise populations. I had somebody say to me, I'm an introvert, but I'm really missing, and they're working at home, I'm really missing that employee interaction. She said, I can only guess what it's like for extroverts if I'm struggling in this. So again, a lot of clients, a lot of employers are being very creative. They're having weekly check-ins. If in the past you were an employer that had you provided lunch for your employees on every other Friday or once a month, they're having virtual lunches. it's all about maintaining employee mental health as well, which we'll talk about at the end of this. So it's very important to keep sustaining that employee engagement, letting employees know you're still very much a valued part of this organization. Although we're not in close proximity, we're always available to you. Okay. I'm going to very quickly, domestic violence and alcohol abuse. It's looking pretty scary, folks. I have to be honest with you. With domestic violence, the employer is still obligated under workplace violence and harassment. When pre-COVID times, when everybody was at work, if you were aware or ought reasonably to have known that there was a domestic violence situation going on, you had obligations to take care of your employees. Now that some employees are now forced to work from home and they're in a domestic situation, there's still that obligation. And it's a very tough answer in terms of what you should do. But again, if you do your due diligence and you go through the right questions and the right steps and try to ensure that your employee gets somewhere safe, you will be covered. Okay. Alcohol abuse, well, LCBO sales are up 50%. And again, I've been on enough virtual meetings that people are kind of letting their hair down. I don't have any to let down. And, in meetings, I wouldn't do it, but some people are having a beer or a drink. So it's good to be mindful that, again, promoting that employee wellness piece and saying, even though you're working virtually, you should, as I keep telling some employers, tell your employees to treat it like they are at the work site. Okay. And I'm even saying to him, and I'm developing a checklist for this. When employees get up in the morning, they should be going through their routine like they're going through the office. Go take a shower in the morning, brush your teeth, shave, whatever. Make your coffee and be at your computer ready to work 15 minutes before your start time like you normally would. And do that. And then you don't fall into these, I would say, COVID traps of having that midday drink or that early afternoon drink. So again, it's something that the employer should be on top of when, with working from home considerations. I'm now starting to see that some employers are starting to say to employees, when you're on a virtual meeting, I expect you to have the same type of professional dress that you would as if you were at the office. So managing employee performance, and this goes for both remote and back in the office. There may be some things you have to adjust in your performance expectations because of COVID. I know a number of my clients that where sales people, they're so highly dependent, or they really work hard to get their bonuses or commissions. And now they may not be able, if that's been a pre-established that they have to meet certain goals before they earn their bonus, that may be impossible for them now. So going back and making changes because of COVID is not a bad thing. I think that the ability to put in a temporary, because of COVID, these are going to be our expectations of you. That's not a bad thing to do. And again, as long as everybody is in agreement with it, it's going to stick. Just with everything else we've got this, think of the COVID picture there, that Sputnik-like thing that's hanging over us with everything that we do. And I don't mean to sound dramatic or everything, but it is impacting everything from policies and procedures to health and safety. Everything is with that view right now. Celebrate the successes. And this goes back to making sure employees are engaged. Thank them for continuing to work and coming into work or working remotely, despite all the challenges and despite the fact that, yeah, we're doing everything we can to maintain your safety, but nothing is guaranteed. Nothing is ironclad. And again, if you're back, even as I said before, even if you're doing virtual, and if you're back on site, try to have as much of a quote normal work routine in terms of potluck lunches, barbecues, things of that. I think those things can be easily maintained while still keeping the social distancing protocols and all that in place as well. I've seen a lot of innovation, a lot of creativity from my clients and other things that I'm hearing in the community. So acclimating employees, before you have employees returning to work, these are some of the things you want to, I'm also cognizant of time. I'm sorry, I get very passionate about these and I want to make sure that you guys have all the information you need. If you don't think of questions now, I'm sure Adrian would be happy to link us up so that you can ask me questions later. So again, communication. You know, we're allowed to open up shop again and we need you to return to work. These are the things that are going to be in place so that you can return to work safely. Okay. I'm going to jump ahead because this may be a question. For some of you may be aware, or all of you may be aware for that matter, employees have the right to refuse unsafe work. And all they really need is a reasonable belief that the work is unsafe. So how does that apply to COVID? Well, what has transpired in the last few months, and this has cropped up, of course, people have said, I'm not coming into work because of COVID. The Ministry of Labor, Occupational Health and Safety inspectors, most of them are doing over the phone assessments. The key thing is, do you have hand sanitizer? Do you have masks? Well, they get a sense of what your workforce is like first. Do you have all that protective gear that people need? Can you maintain social distancing? And if the answers to that are yes, yes, and yes, and the other key question is there anybody that is currently quarantined for possible COVID or anybody who's been diagnosed with it? The answers to that are no, it's deemed a safe workplace. So yeah, that gives the employer a lot of leeway to say, get your butt back to work. But I think you need to look at the bigger picture in some cases, and it depends on the employee. Maybe they are using this as an excuse to stay off work. I don't know. And any, reasonableness. So if you're in a position and you believe, it's probably a better thing that the employee is off as opposed to being at work, then give them that temporary leave, okay? But that doesn't mean it's forever, and at some point they do have to return to work, okay? There's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of black and white. There's also a lot of gray areas, and it's all dependent on employee situations as well.
On that, if
sorry.
A quick question. So if an employer puts into place requirements to wear a mask, can an employer make that a requirement, or Absolutely. Is that, and if someone refuses to wear a mask, how does that fall into the mix?
It's like a regular health and safety thing where if people aren't wearing earplugs, eyeglasses, safety boots, that is considered a violation of a health and safety policy, and the disciplinary process kicks in for them. So if they refused, it's written warning. It could be sending them home for the day if they're going to continue to refuse. But again, I think you have to keep in mind there's the fear factor in this and the uncertainty factor in this. And I, for one, I take this very seriously. I think this is very serious infectious disease. I know there's those out there that are saying it's just like the flu. I don't believe that. So I would be advising a client that came to me and said, this is what the employee is saying. Send them home for the day. We'll have another discussion to talk about what do you need in place to feel a little bit safer? And try to educate them about, well, this is what public health is telling us. This is the guidelines, and working from there. Okay. But if you know, if you get the sense that this is just they don't want to work, then you address that as well. Okay. These are there's no easy answers here, but there are answers. Okay. And at some point at the end of the day, the employer does have the right to say, if you're not willing to come back and we've got everything in place, we have no choice but to take that action. You either, you know, if you're not going to resign, then we have to look at letting you go. So, is there anything else cropping up? The thing keeps dropping down.
Yes, on that, there was a question if they don't, I think you might have answered, but if you could reiterate. So if they don't want to work, what can the employer do without being penalized? So if everything is in place, what's that process?
Okay, so again, you go through your work refusal, because basically that's what it comes down to. If I'm understanding the question correctly, they don't want to come in for, actually, I'll do a couple of scenarios with that one. They don't want to come in because they feel it's an unsafe workplace. You get the Ministry of Labor or your Health and Safety Committee to, they come to the consensus that all the safety practices are in place. If they continue to refuse, you can either use your disciplinary process to suspend, terminate, or, you know, if you're feeling like, okay, I need to give them a little bit of rope here considering the situation, and I will put them on a leave of absence until they're ready to come back. Okay. I know some employers are asking to be laid off, and do that at your own peril, because if you lay that person off and you know, you put on their ROE, we laid them off. If they find out it wasn't necessary, there may be some consequences down the road. The EI people are being fairly flexible and not doing a lot of follow-up with questions and all that. But when all this is over, will they go back and audit? Maybe. Okay. I had a client with a couple of employees that asked to go on reduced work weeks because of childcare issues. I said, absolutely, we can do that. We'll put on their ROE that it's due to childcare considerations, and you know, they won't get penalized as well. So, yeah.
Thank you, Neil. And
No
we
problem.
are just at almost 1:50.
Okay, and I'm sorry. We've already talked about this, health and safety and human resources policies. Make sure any changes that are there are communicated so that people are aware as much as possible. Oops. Sorry, I'll go back to that slide later. Okay, returning to work, the Safe 6 checklist. So when you're bringing people back to work, ensure the safety of workers, ready equipment, everything properly sanitized. I know that I keep telling clients, if you've got private cleaners, make sure they're doing healthcare grade cleanings, so disinfecting everything. I've also just come in contact with a company that is doing fogging, and I guess this is a cleaning method that is even above and beyond that. So ensure that your areas are being cleaned properly. Educate and train employees on the new protocols, which could be some things as there could be a checklist of, are you exhibiting any of these symptoms? And employees need to do a self-check. All employees, including managers, need to do a self-check. And if you are exhibiting 1 or 2 symptoms, talk with the employee, see what it may or may not be. I know for some employers, if their employee is telling them they have 1 symptom, they're asking them to go get tested, okay? And you absolutely have that right to ask employees to go get tested. Okay. Yeah, communicate with them the importance of the new PPE stuff, masks, shields, if necessary, gloves, washing your hands or sanitizing your hands, like as much as possible. Okay, just to prevent. Everything is about touch, and I know myself. It's only recently I became aware of the many different things that we touch, and it could be living on any surface. Okay. Controlling access points. So some, I know for some of my clients, like I'll use the healthcare client for example. They're not allowing people to book appointments. They're doing virtual stuff. But if they feel that it's necessary, a person comes in. The person shows up to the parking lot, calls them and says, "I'm here." They come, they unlock the doors, they let them in. The physicians, nurses see them in full hazmat type gear, and after they leave, there is a complete decontamination of that. What do you call it? Medical room. Okay. So limit the amount of visitors that you can have. Go through a complete sanitization. It is certainly within your rights that you ask visitors to have protective gear as well. Okay. Questions? You're on mute.
There's a question, but Ola, the question is more about, is she considered essential? And I'm going to send a link out with the slides. It's to the province of Ontario. That's a question that Neil and I won't be able to answer. You need to look at the Ontario website for the list of essential businesses. And they also have a hotline that you can call and ask them. So I'll include that in the email follow-up. It's recommended to communicate with them. But thank you for the question. Ola, unfortunately, won't be able to answer that in this seminar.
Okay. Social distance plan, as we know, it's 2 meters or 6 feet. Again, some of my construction clients say that's virtually impossible. So there is a little bit of flexibility with that, is if you cannot be more than 6 feet or more away from a person, then you must be wearing masks and things of that nature. I know some employers and some of my clients are not having full staff complements in. And where possible, they're letting some staff work from home on a Monday and a Wednesday, and there's some staff in Monday and Tuesday, and then it flips that the crew working at home goes in Wednesday and Thursdays. So I think that's something to consider as well. I also know that for some clients, say they work in the administration and there's a factory floor, the doors between the administration and the factory are closed, and the two never meet unless they absolutely have to. So it's minimizing that contact as well. The cleaning protocols are onerous, they're rigorous, and they must be adhered to daily. Again, going on the touch points and increased cleaning, just trying to keep people from touching as little as possible. And again, communicate. I can't reiterate that enough. Are you going to satisfy all employees' needs for communication? No. But if you can show you've done your due diligence, then you're in a good spot to do that. Okay. We've talked a lot about this screening. I know some of my clients have asked me for screening tools to ask those questions, and then the employee signs off on it. That's okay to do, but if a person gets sick and they haven't been symptomatic, don't use that as a disciplinary tool, because again, these things come on as quickly as possible. So I did want to talk about this, and part of this is I have a background in mental health as well. Before I got into human resources, I worked in the mental health field. there is an increase in mental health issues. And I think that's kind of rhetorical to say, in that people are scared to come back to work. They're scared to be working remotely. They're fearful of what is going to happen in the future. They're fearful of getting sick themselves. Personally, I've known 2 people to catch COVID. One person was the stage before they went on a ventilator, but recovered and is doing fine. And the other person had a very mild case of it and recovered very quickly. So, and I can tell you from the individual that was 1 step before a ventilator, she described the illness as, you just want to get hit by a Mack truck to get put out of your misery. It's that ill. She said it was like nothing else she had ever encountered before. She's worked through colds, she's worked through flus, but this was something completely different. So, and again, that point there about the fine line between enforcement and empathy, and it's a big line. And how much do we show that empathy and still maintain our, getting things done and our business done? That's going to be, it's not a cookie cutter approach. It's going to be unique to each organization as well. But feel free to talk about it. One of the other things that the employers and clients have been doing is having just open conversations and encouraging employees on their own, either virtually or in person with 6 feet apart protocols. How are you feeling about things? And I know myself, one of my clients has asked me next week to check in with employees that are still working from home and getting a barometer of how they're feeling, because they don't feel they're doing well, but they think there might be a fear there that if they tell their boss they're not doing well, then there's going to be repercussions as well. So having an outside source that they know, it might be a little bit better, and I might be able to reassure them. Build resiliency within your organization. Accept what is out of control, control what you can control. Be positive. Try to turn change into an opportunity, and just keep that, keep that connection alive. For some people that have been adhering to protocols 1,000%, they may not have been out in months, except for their backyard or to get groceries. So there's a sense of isolation there. And if you've got people, the introverted or those with very few friends, they're even more alone. And one thing that came up when we were doing this, which I haven't addressed in this presentation, and it's basically a presentation on its own, is if you on the continuum of diversity and multiculturalism, if you have people that are from other countries that are here alone, then this isolation is even more exacerbated as well. Okay. And the mental health piece, if you have people with pre-existing mental health conditions, this may be exacerbated as well. Their fear and anxiety and uncertainty. So when you are, again, these are some of the pieces of legislation we should be aware of when we're looking at not just mental health issues, but other things. Are they in compliance with Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act? Some employers, depending on your size and what you do, you have obligations under the AODA to have accommodation plans for your employees. Human rights. Now, this is a loosey-goosey area. The Ontario Human Rights Commission has offered various opinions on what might transpire if somebody was denied or denied something which they felt was discrimination under the disability component of human rights. But thus far, there has been nothing in terms of somebody filing a human rights complaint and a decision has been made that sets the course for what this looks like. Just while I'm talking about that, one of the key things that has come up that has now been, from my perspective, is no longer an argument. when people were doing temporary layoffs, some lawyers were saying, or this constituted constructive dismissal. That argument has been eradicated because last week they announced that anybody on a temporary layoff would be considered on a leave of absence now. Okay. Does that mean that there's not going to be any challenges post-COVID to this? Yeah, there still are. There's going to be some lawyers out there, and by no means am I knocking all lawyers. There's going to be some lawyers out there that say this was an infringement of the employee's rights because the employer didn't say that there was a chance of temporary layoffs. My hope is that common sense will prevail, and I know common sense is different amongst all people. A litigator, a judge, an adjudicator will look at this and say, we were not in normal times, and businesses had to do what they had to do in order to survive, and the temporary layoff was necessary. It wasn't malicious, it wasn't planned, it was something that was unforeseen. But I know because of this, a lot of employment contracts are now being rewritten to put in a clause that a temporary layoff may occur at any time during the employment relationship. We've talked about Occupational Health and Safety Act and some of the provisions of that. I did want to talk about, because this has come up, how are we doing for time? 2 o'clock.
We could probably go, everyone's still on the call. This is very valuable information. So how many slides do you have left, Neil? Because we could have their 10 minutes. If you could.
10 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
So terminations, you are still entitled to do terminations through this. And I understand that in some cases, that may not be possible face to face. And again, there now seems to be an allowance that if you need to do this over the phone or virtually, that's going to be accepted. Pre-COVID times, this would not have been accepted. This would have been a knock against the employer. It would have been considered demeaning to the employee. But again, because of the protocols that are in place, temporarily at least, this is okay to do, okay? And I've talked about the constructive dismissal piece with layoffs. And for those that may not know what constructive dismissal means, it is a radical realtering of the employment relationship whereby it doesn't look like the original contract that was agreed to, okay? So it may also include if you hire a person as a manager and you demote them, that's constructive dismissal, okay? And what that means is you owe them pay in lieu and severance obligations, if applicable, if they have been constructively dismissed from the job you hired them for. There's other factors that you could do, like loss of income, things of that nature. But with respect to what we're talking about here, it's to do with layoffs. And again, layoffs may still be considered constructive dismissal, but I think there's new things in place that are protecting employers right now, okay? And actually, that's it. This was my last slide. So we are done, and I apologize for hitting you with a ton of information, but again, I want you to have the full range, and I'm happy to review and go into further detail, some of the more finer details of this, if you want to, either reach out through me through here or schedule some time through Adrian.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Neil, for joining us. We'll leave the time open for some questions. We'll give it a few moments, and I'm just grabbing a couple of links to share with everyone that's on the call today. So we have an expert in mental health who's going to be speaking next week about coping with fear and anxiety. So that might be a great opportunity. This professional, her name's Julie Christiansen, and she does work with organizations quite a bit as well. So that's a great opportunity for employers on the line if they want some more help with the mental health piece. And then we have WSPS. They're going to be talking about the different pretty much occupational health and safety requirements, regulations, and best practices. So such great information to marry with what Neil spoke about today. So thank you. We have some comments coming in saying well done and thank you. And again, Neil did volunteer his time today to speak with us. So please take advantage of his 20 years of expertise and knowledge. We have a couple more minutes left. So if you do have a question, I won't mention your name or business. If you do have a question, I'll read it off to Neil for some feedback. I'm just gonna grab those links as well, Neil.
Okay, and if you don't mind, I'm just going to talk a little bit about HR Prime. So we offer the full continuum of HR services. While I said our niche is legislation, compliance, mandatory training, we have other people with us that can do things like wellness, organizational development, compensation, benefits. I do offer a free consult because some people may not know what they need for HR, or they have some questions about what that looks like. Also to keep in mind, with small and medium-sized businesses and startups, we have a sliding scale for fees. So you're not IBM, and we know that, okay?
Thank you, Neil. We haven't had any questions come in, just a lot of thank yous. We still have everyone on the call. So thank you so much for joining us today. I will stop the recording.